Hey, everybody. I'm gonna see if people join. So I'm gonna give it a couple minutes. And I'm gonna try in the meantime to go live on Instagram also. Hey, Christine. Hey, everybody joining. I'm just giving everyone a few minutes to jump on before we get started. Hey, Marnie. Hey, Janet. So are you all excited? Because we did some really great work in Trenton this last month. Hey, Christine. Y'all are exhausted. I'm tired too. Thank you for being here tonight. Um, I'm tired and I got home last night and I took a bath and I was like, I really have to talk about this because there, as Sweeney was saying, like he's going to come right back at us. Um, and I think this is really a crucial conversation of how we're going to make a difference and stop this bill in the long term. So thank you all for being here and taking the time, even though like we're all super exhausted. So I'll get started and hopefully people can and then share this information. If you're in any groups, then please share it. And it's going to be on the page so we can continue this conversation. So just a little bit so you know who I am, and I have like notes over here that I'm looking at because I wrote it all out. I don't want to miss anything today. So I'm going to talk for a little bit and then I'll have a little bit of time at the end that if you have any questions, we can talk about that as well. But my name is Heather Batten, and I live in New Jersey. And for the last month, I've been kicking butt with the rest of you, with our legislators, and really concerned about these vaccine mandates and what does that mean for our kids and our society, and the impact that's going to have on all of us. I think we're all super concerned. The other thing that I do, or really how I came to understand how vaccines were problematic, is that I'm an anti-racist organizer. So I've been doing that for 20 years, really. And how I became a lot more effective at doing it was with the People's Institute of Survival and Beyond, for Survival and Beyond. And they have a workshop called Undoing Racism. So now she's the current executive director, Dr. Kimberly Richards. She's a Black woman, and she was the one who really made me aware of the fact that vaccines are tied into systemic racism. So that's something that for me has always been the connection between racism and vaccine mandates, or just vaccines as a whole, and how it is tied to this long-standing historical problem that we have in this country. And that's how I was woken up to really kind of look into our medical system as a whole much more deeply. So the other things that I do, I'm also a clinical social worker, and I've been working in child welfare for 20 years, for a long time as well. Um, and I'm a resource trainer with People's Institute of Survival and Beyond, and doing work with them in New Jersey. So they have been, I think, in New Jersey doing training for probably like 20 years or more. And they do a lot of work in New York City as well. So that is a little bit about my background and my experience. And then along with all of you, I've kind of seen how all of this has played out over the last month. And even more so, I have a almost 7-year-old. Over the last 7 years of what's been going on, that I've been really concerned about her and how this is going to impact her. So before we go, I think a little bit deeper into racism and how it has impacted vaccine mandates and kind of like how we were successful, I just want to kind of go over a few points of the conversation and this is something that we use in anti-racist community organizing as a whole, is like, what is the contract? What is the covenant? How are we going to engage with each other? Because talking about race is a really emotional topic. And I think a lot of us understand that because we know that talking about vaccines is a really emotional topic. And the other piece of it is that there is like a indoctrination that happens, and that is really hard for people to see beyond that. So we know that happens with vaccines, and it's actually also something that happens with race as well. So just to keep that in mind, and I think that we're a really great group of people to be having this conversation, because we know that there's a lot that we're not being told. We're not being told in the media, that we're not being taught, that there's a lot that's hidden from us. So I think that's an important parallel when we're talking about race and racism, to keep an open mind to that. So along that lines, that we want to really listen, right? And that a lot of my mentors would say, when you scramble the letters of listen, you get silent. And we're not really taught in our society how to listen, to kind of take information in. We're taught to listen to respond, right? That we're going to have an argument, we're going to have a debate. And so when we're talking about race and racism, we really want to listen and take in this information. And I know that can be really difficult, because this information might be something that you haven't heard. And so that kind of goes to the next thing, and really like why I call the work that I do the growing edge, because you really have to stay with that growing edge that you have. And so that means like the discomfort that you're having, maybe you're feeling like you don't agree. And hey, everybody on Instagram, I'm on Facebook Live also, so I'm sorry if I'm not looking at y'all, but I just wanted to make sure that I reached anyone that I could. So just so you all know, I'm also on Instagram Live. If I keep looking over that way, I'm also looking at my notes to make sure that I'm getting everything that I can. So yeah, so to stay with the discomfort as well, because part of that is that if we're not sitting with the discomfort of like talking about race, that is how this divide and conquer process will continue to manifest itself, right? And we see how that was almost really successful in pushing this bill forward, is like keeping us in our separate interests separated. So the last one, for tonight, or, to keep in mind as we're talking about medical freedom, race, and racism, is that this is not going to be a quick fix. We're not going to be able to solve overnight the impact of racism on medical freedom. And even I know like a lot of the conversation in our community is that we are very the face in the media, and even we saw yesterday in Trenton, for the most part, everyone who's there is white presenting. And so that is in some ways being used against us. And we know that that's not the case. That's not the impact this is having, but that there's work that we need to do in order to be able to cross those racial lines and have this conversation and be able to organize and work together. So keep those things in mind, right? We're going to listen. We're going to stay with any discomfort and the growing edge that we have. And we're also going to remember that this is not a quick fix. This is going to require some work on our part. So just to kind of like talk about the bill in general, right? So, and how racism plays a part with that. So it's S2173 or A3818. This was always a bill that was going to have an impact on people of color more than anyone else, right? So systemic racism guarantees that anytime that there is a restriction on anything, or that we're making changes, or even the laws that we have today, and we look at the systems, it has a worse impact on people of color across the board. In every system, we can look at those outcomes, and they are not, people of color, especially Black people and Indigenous people, are not faring as good as their white counterparts. So we know that when we take away the ability to opt out of vaccines, that all of the impact that has is going to have a worse impact on Black people. So always from the beginning, and I've heard people saying this throughout the movement, that this always is going to have a negative impact. So, some of those ways, right, just to really define them, because race and class often are linked, right? And disproportionately, people of color, Black people, have less access to financial means, less access to resources, less access to power and privilege. So that would look like, perhaps, and this is not a exhaustive list, but it would look like less ability to homeschool because you need to work, because that requires some level of privilege, resources to stay home and have the flexibility in your schedule. And I know that there's a lot of homeschooling moms who, have been super creative in figuring that out. But I think for people, they feel like restricted in that ability and in their ability to do that. So less ability to move, that there's financial resources that are required to pick up and move. Less options for alternative healthcare. We know that doctors are kicking us out of their practices left and right. And when you have less financial means, less options to be able to, pay the fee for the doctor, go out of state, see a homeopath, see someone who's out of network. And the other thing that I see a lot, because I'm working in child welfare, is that there's much more severe consequences when we're looking at school systems and when we're looking at child welfare for Black families if they are not complying. And that we know that there's an increased rate of infant mortality. In New Jersey, the infant mortality rate for Black children is double that of their white counterparts. And so oftentimes those families are interacting with child welfare. And then I think, a lot of us were talking about we have like limited studies, but there was, the studies around the 260% increased rate for Black boys with autism. And so we know that our autism rate in New Jersey is skyrocketing. So no one's done the study, but clearly it's impacting Black boys more. So that's just the basics, right, of this bill, moving the religious exemption, and potentially has the impact to Black people much more. Where are we going next? So, then I just wanted to kind of like take a moment to acknowledge all of the organizing that all of us did. And as we go into to talk about the impact that race had and how we were successful, this is not to dismiss all of the organizing that we did up until this point. All of the, we have New Jersey Coalition for Vaccine Choice, and all of us who have been over 25 years, I think that their existence is, building relationships with legislators, holding off these bills for decades, really, and putting into place kind of this this movement and these relationships. We know, we were visiting legislators, we were sending emails, we were making calls, we were doing all sorts of stuff. Calling on the relationships that we have. We have, innovative parenting that has like done an amazing, amazing, amazing job with marketing and rallying the masses and helping us reach out to all of the collective that's already concerned about us. And then like on the ground protesting, we know how hard it was on our bodies, on our children, on our work schedules, and everyone who organized that and everyone who came out and how amazing it was. And then we had the Republicans really, 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 really stepping up and one by one, like reaching out to us and connecting with us and standing up for us. We had Senator Bucco, Senator Testa, Senator Cardinale, Senator Brown, Senator Doherty, and then in my district, there's Senator Panaccio, who really had a powerful speech on the floor. I don't know if you should listen to it if you haven't. And he has Senate Resolution 170, which I think is, something really, really powerful that we can use. So plus we had, the Children's Health Defense and RFK and Del Bigtree and Dr. Shiva and Dr. Tenpenny, and right. So this is all of the work that's building and building and building up to this point. And, we have thousands of people coming out and making this happen. And, really, really important work. So anything after this, I just want you to keep in mind, is not to discredit or compete with, or like we did our thing together and made it happen. But the thing that we also have to acknowledge, and I think everyone is really talking about, we're a very white group. And it is, I think that then the amendments and how they were put into place was an attempt at like divide and conquer, right? So we'll get to that in a minute. So just to keep in mind that, how potentially to think about this when we're talking cross-racially. So the other thing that was happening, right, was that in addition to the Republicans that were speaking out strongly due to, I think, a lot of the amazing organizing that we did, we also had from very, 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 very early on, and I think, I don't have the relationships like NJCVC does and the district leaders with the legislators, but from very early on, Senator Rice was staunchly opposed to this, Senator Gill and Senator Turner. From the beginning, were making statements that they were a no vote, even before the amendments. And then, from what I was informed also, that Senator Turner in the past has sponsored a philosophical exemption bill. So something to keep in mind. So those are also, Senator Rice is the chairman for the Legislative Black Caucus, and Senator Gill and Senator Turner, they're like the three elders of the Legislative Black Caucus. So that's really significant, right? That they're stepping out and they're saying no. And why were they doing that, right? I think that's a really important question to ask because, I think for a lot of people, they're saying that this is a partisan issue, that Democrats are pushing this forward, we need to vote them out. And I hear you, like this has woken me up a lot to the fact that what's going on with the Democrats, and that they are, forcing a lot of things and taking away rights. And, I've generally voted Democrat because of like my connection to social justice. And I'm like, hold on a minute, like I'm missing something here. What's going on? And so I think this is a key to understanding that why were these three senators, and I think, not that they were the only ones that are Democrats that were concerned about this, but from the beginning, really kind of making a stand quietly, but, not wavering that this is something that they had a problem with. So then also we had in the Assembly, Assemblyman Hawley, who from the beginning was saying that he was against this bill. And so why are they willing to cross party lines when we're saying that, Democrats want to push this forward? That's their agenda. So I think here, this is where we have an opportunity to really acknowledge that race is a factor. And so how, there is a very deep connection between vaccines, not just vaccine mandates, but vaccines and systemic racism. So vaccines don't really stand alone as a medical intervention, or as something that is a medical intervention that is used to profit off of people's bodies. So there is a whole history of that, really, in this country, of medical experimentation, medical procedures that were forced without consent. And a lot of that really has been on Black people, on people of color. So there is, I don't know whether this will show up reversed or not, but there is a book called Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. So this is a 500-page book. It is the only book written so far, and it details from the beginning of this country to really current day of what is the history around medical experimentation on Black people. So this is something that we really need to keep in mind as we're having this conversation. And so I think a lot of us have talked about Tuskegee experiments, and that's like kind of one that we're more aware of, right? That US airmen were experimented on and given syphilis without their consent and without their knowledge, to see like what happens, what's the progression. And so this is really something that is just the tip of the iceberg, right? You see that there's a 500-page book that is talking about medical experimentation and how our country has profited off of that, and specifically off of doing it to Black people. So there's a lot more history that I think that we can explore around what has happened there. And I think that's something that in general in the anti-racist organizing that I do, that there is a lot of Black people that are aware of that and concerned about how they're being treated by the medical establishment. So we have an opportunity to really learn more and to explore more and to connect with those communities and those people that are concerned about that history, right? Not just about vaccines, but about how it is connected to the history of our country. So then we had Senator O'Scanlan's amendments, which really, in my opinion, in the long run, were a gift to us in being able to expose really what's going on. So, and I think it was, it was really upsetting for us. And I know like people are saying that they're exhausted. Like I'm exhausted, we don't want to be there fighting this with the amendments, but I always say, that when things come to the surface, it's difficult and it's a crisis, but it's also an opportunity. And I think this was really an opportunity, and it is a gift to this movement because we're going to be able to come together in a way that we haven't been able to do before. So these amendments really kind of exposed, right, that they were explicit to us, saying that only private schools would have access to religious exemption. And we quickly made the connection that, okay, so you're saying that only wealthy people can buy their way into having a way out of vaccines. So the other connection that we talked about earlier is that race and class are inextricably tied in this country because of the history that we have. And so I think, is my opinion, that these amendments were really kind of an attempt to divide and conquer, right? That seeing that the face of the movement that we had was generally white, and that perhaps they could knock a bunch of us off, people saying like, you know what, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, this is a lot of work, I'm taking time away from work and my family. And, we were saying that. And, we're gonna just bump them off and they'll make their own schools. And we heard, what Senator O'Scanlan was saying, that it was a request from people that he had talked to. And I, honestly, I can understand why that is a request, because this is a difficult fight. It really is. Like, and this is something that is gaining momentum, unless we find really, really creative, courageous ways to address it in new ways, that they're going to keep going. So, something to keep in mind also about the history of race in this country. It has been used as a way to divide and conquer. So going all the way back to the 1600s, when the white race was codified, right? And if you don't know the history, and we're not going to go into it in depth here, but it's something I think that in a future training or a future live, we can explore a little bit more. But that white race, you can see how it showed up in legislation around the time that there was also some rebellion going on against the elite. So it was really developed as a way to offer power and privilege to those of us with white skin, to divide and conquer us from Black people, so that the elite then, who were really in control, who were really in power, would be protected, and that the buffer really is whiteness, and those of us that belong to the white race, and a lot of us, and even people who who are wealthy and white, we're not really talking about them as the elite. It's the people who are in control, right? And to me, in this movement, that represents pharmaceutical companies, that represents the people who we don't see, who are making billions and billions of dollars off of us and looking down as we fight each other. I think this amendment really was a divide and conquer tactic. But it also made it more visible to us, more explicit, and something, it was really always there, but it exposed the true intention of what was behind this bill. So it also, this is not a partisan issue. I said that before. And racism as a whole is not a partisan issue. This is a systemic issue that our country is dealing with, that is really in the fabric of the founding of this country. So in this bill, we know it was sponsored by the Dems, and the amendment was suggested by a Republican. So this is like both parties really coming together to push this forward, and to see how they can benefit from it. And who knows what's behind the door, and what kind of benefits that they're getting. I think that we can make a lot of guesses as to what that is. So, I think what is really, really beautiful about what we did in New Jersey is that we did not roll over when this amendment happened. We were tired, we were exhausted, but we said, wait a minute, like, this is not right. We know that this is going to have a difficult impact on poor people. We know that this is going to have a difficult impact on Black people. We could have said forget it, but we didn't, right? So we recognized that this impact, and we came even harder. I don't know, like, if anyone knows, you can comment with whatever the number was there. To me, it seemed like it was like 3,000 people. It was a lot of people in Trenton yesterday. And we came really, really hard. And I know people are really not there just for themselves. They're there for the movement. They understand the larger impact of this, and it's super important. So this amendment also was really an opportunity, and I think I give a lot of credit to Assemblyman Hawley then to step up and speak out and rally his peers, right? So to me, this weekend, the work that he did in talking to the rest of the Legislative Black Caucus and rallying his Black peers and other Black legislators around this issue was a crucial piece of what flipped or prevented the votes from happening. All right, so I think to make that connection, right, it was once these amendments happened, because we could say, okay, it already passed in the Assembly, so why did they pass it, and then now they didn't have the votes, and what was going on, and what was the thinking? So what I believe, right, is that once these amendments came forward, and it was more clear, like we were saying, right, that this is a segregatory kind of initiation act that Assemblyman Hawley was able to say, or kind of connect that to the really recent history in our country of segregation, of Jim Crow, that happened in schools, right? We have like Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education, which were already addressing this issue. And Assemblyman Hawley said, listen, these are wounds that have not been healed yet in this country, that many Black people are still experiencing the impact of this. So this is really, really clear that this is problematic and that we don't want to go backwards, we want to go forwards. So this was really a way that he was able to connect with the rest of the legislators. And I don't know, I wasn't inside any of those. I don't know what happened. I don't know whose mind was changed and what was going on. And maybe other people have insight that I don't have. But I think that this is key. And I believe that this is something that we need to really dive deeper into and learn more, so that we can make the connection between the history in this country of medical experimentation, systemic racism, and vaccine mandates, and to really dive deep into that. So what I'm going to say, I think the next steps for our movement and our collective is to really capitalize on the relationship that we've built, right, with Assemblyman Hawley, with Senator Rice, with Senator Gill, with Senator Turner, and this conversation that we're having about the impact of vaccines and the connection to medical racism as a whole. And so what I'm going to do is, put together some resources and some next steps. So if you want to comment in the comments, equal rights for all, then I will message you like a link to when I put together some of this information. So some of my suggestions are this, and I have 3. That we can really kind of like build on this relationship that we have with Assemblyman Hawley, and with the other legislators who really started questioning this over the weekend and on Monday, which allowed us to not have the votes and not push this forward, because we know they already posted it today, right? So how do we build on that? So the next steps I'm really going to suggest is that all of us buy and read the Medical Apartheid book, right? So we can be really well versed on how is this connected to the history of our country, the history of medical experimentation on Black Americans. This is crucial to the conversation. The next thing that I think that we really need to do is start attending Undoing Racism workshops. So I will send out to people information about how to go to those workshops. They're offered now. They are offered around New Jersey. At different groups are organizing them. So I think that is really, really key to gain the knowledge that we need on like this systemic racism and how it's connected to the issue that we're concerned about. And the other thing is that if there's enough interest, we can organize our own workshop. And I have a really strong relationship with People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, and I've been in communication with them, and they are in support of the work that we're doing. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of the live, that Dr. Kimberly Richards, who is the executive director right now, is very much in support of this, and she is the one who really educated me to the impact of vaccines and how it's connected to racism. So you can find more information about them at their website. It is pisab.org. And I would like for a bunch of us to come together and really organize a workshop and figure out how we can educate ourselves and get this information into our collective. And then what I'm going to be doing, like I said, is developing a longer workshop where you can kind of go into a little bit more depth on how race is used as a divide and conquer tactic, and specifically about what is the history of whiteness, and how we're kind of used by the elite as their buffer, right? And we're really, fighting with people who we have common interests with, and to our own demise in a sense. And then the other part, kind of explore a little bit more of the history of medical experimentation, and make some connections to that. And I think I was having a conversation with a longtime friend of mine today, and he was putting me onto some very interesting stuff about the polio vaccine and its history. And I think, it was just making me think about all the experimentation that is going on in Africa now, and vaccine trials, and, and that is part of this conversation as well. And why is it happening in Africa? So it's definitely also related to racism. So those are really my 3 call to actions for us, to buy and read The Medical Apartheid, to start thinking about attending an Undoing Racism workshop, or getting in contact with me about how we can organize one together for our collective. And then let me know, in the comments, if you want to have more information. We can do a longer discussion on the history of whiteness, and then on medical experimentation. So I don't know how to work the comments on here. If anyone is commenting more. I don't see it. I've never done a live before, so there it is. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, I have a few minutes to kind of answer questions. If you have any, let me scroll down and see. Okay, and Rachel's saying that New Jersey is being sued for school segregation right now. Yep. So I think the more that we are, connected to how this is related to other issues and other systems, we can branch out and make an impact. Any questions, anyone? I'm really, really happy that everyone showed up tonight, that we're having this conversation. And I think, this is really the beginning. And I know that we're tired, and I just wanted to jump on here and just talk about how important it is to recognize how race impacted really our success, right? That we have a relationship now, I think, that we can build with Senator Rice and Senator Gill and Senator Turner, and especially Assemblyman Holley, who really was dynamic and outspoken and making a connection with us. And so how do we build that relationship? And I think it's important, that a relationship is not just one way. So getting to understand what are the concerns of those legislators, what is the impact to their community, and learning more about that is going to be key in terms of making this a multiracial movement. Yeah, I can. Hi, Amanda. I can hold up the book again. And for anyone who wants, if you comment Equal Rights for All, then I will send out links when I pull it together, hopefully this weekend or in the next day or two, about the steps that I'm recommending and more resources. So it's Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. So Melissa's saying, how can we reach more people of color to educate them about the risks of vaccination without coming off as having a white savior complex? Personally, I think that the this work and community organizing work as a whole is in relationship. So if you have relationships with people, no matter what race they are, this is a conversation, I think that we learned over the last month that is really, really important for us to keep speaking about vaccines and the impact that they have. So if you have a relationship, a cross-racial relationship, then that's a conversation that you can be having. But I think where we're having a challenge is that in New Jersey, and this is, not just New Jersey, it's across the country, that we live in a lot of segregated communities. So our cross-racial relationships are not as much as they could or should be. So I think what I'm saying in terms of educating ourselves on the history is going to help us in having those conversations. But it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some commitment on our part, because otherwise I think that the wounds of racism come up and prevent us from having those authentic relationships, from being able to connect across racial lines. So, this is really just the beginning for this conversation. And like I said in the beginning of, the live tonight, that I don't have like a magic wand. I don't have a magic solution. This is going to be some hard work, and it's going to take some time. But it's something that we really can make happen if we make a commitment to it. Anyone have any more questions? Thanks, Mia. Thank you, Amanda, for putting the title in there. I'll give it like another minute for more questions. And obviously, this is just the beginning. Like, we're going to have more conversation about this. And I really want to connect with everyone else who is concerned about this topic, because I think that we can make a really big impact. And this is part of, I think, what New Jersey can offer to the rest of the country in learning this in this way, and connecting cross-racially and making this a multiracial movement. This is something that is going to stop this legislation from moving forward in the long term. It's going to take our commitment. It's going to take hard work. It's going to take discomfort on our parts. It's going to take doing something new. But I promise you, from like the bottom of my heart, I feel that we are going to be able to make a difference in this way. So I really appreciate y'all being here. I'm glad that I'm with y'all. And I think we'll end it at that, unless there's any more questions. Oh, someone on Instagram. I'm not sure I understand your question. It says, any other resources to suggest that are people of color talking about vaccines and racism? Like a book, you mean? I mean, I think that those three things would be the place to start. And then, when I come back and maybe we have a longer webinar that people sign up for, we can get into some more resources. I have to take some time and do a little bit more research and connect with some of my mentors to see how we can do that. Is there a way to have these info sessions with leaders in the community so people are aware of the race connection? Alejandra, can you say more about like which leaders do you mean? And so over on Instagram, so you're saying like influencers to follow and pages? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think I'm not sure. I think that this is not a topic that a lot of people are talking about right now. And especially like in anti-racism, it's not even really happening. And kind of my explanation or my thought on that is that, there's so many more, I think, pressing things. I mean, and we know that like vaccines can kill after one shot. But in general, for a lot of people, it's a slow death or like a long connection to medications and, pharmaceuticals over your life. So it's really about like prioritizing, if people are being shot and killed in the street or, much worse consequences, people aren't able to really like spread themselves that thin and address stuff. So I think that we as a collective have an opportunity to really make that connection. And there are communities talking about it. And I think publicly, I'm not sure. I think that maybe as we start talking about it publicly more, we will find everyone else who is doing it as well. Yes, Assemblyman Holly is in District 20. And I think, he's going to be key for us to build a relationship with. And he's doing some good work, and I'm hoping to connect with him soon. So Assemblyman Holly, let's get together. Yeah. Sounds good, Alejandro. So you're saying like an information session or more discussion. I think that we definitely need more discussion. And I think that we should do that. All right, y'all. So I'm gonna say good night. Thank you for all the hard work. I don't know where everyone is from, but I appreciate like the connections that I've made over the last month and over these years of working towards this. And I think that we're going in the right direction. Let's continue to build relationships. Let's love on each other. Let's figure this out. And we're gonna get there. So let's be in touch soon. Let's continue this conversation.